Riddle me this. With draft uncertainty looming, Mel Kiper and I try to pinpoint where the nation's top prospects could land in April. That's coming up. Plus, we're responding to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live as First Draft starts right now. Hello and welcome into First Draft. We are live twice a week, every Monday and Thursday. Of course, on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel, Mondays on ESPN2, and anywhere you get your podcasts as well. He is Mel Kiper Jr., and I am merely Mel Kiper Jr. What do you think about that, Mel? The internet has a new nickname for me.
I love it. You got to make up for this hair loss that I'm sustaining and dealing with year after year, right? It keeps going back, as Boomer would say.
Yeah.
But that hair you got, that's Kiper 1984 to maybe 94, and then it just fizzled away to nothing. So you're going back into the early years of Kiper, but I like it. I like it. You can take over those reins anytime you want, Phil, because you certainly, the knowledge, because you are an encyclopedia of knowledge. But the hair is, I'd say I never gave a 10. Elway got a 9.9.
Wow.
I'm going to say right now, you're right on the heels of John Elway.
Wow. Okay, all right. So can I retire? Because I'm not sure it gets any better than that compliment there.
No,
man,
I got. What are you, 34?
Yeah, 37, 38 soon. Yeah. 38 the day before the draft.
I could have said 24. Nobody would have argued.
That's true. Okay. I should have lied. I'll be 28 the day before the NFL draft, which is just about 4 weeks away, exactly 4 weeks away from today. And Mel, last time we were on the show, we broke down your mock 3.0. Again, head on over to the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel to check out parts 1 and 2. But today we're doing something a little bit different, Mel, which is breaking down players and sort of discussing the relative range for them. Most of the guys that we're going to talk about today are going to be players that we think go in round 1, maybe early in round 2. But the bottom line about this year's draft that is so different than last year's draft is there is just this stark contrast in terms of the number of blue chip players, right? Last year, I felt confident that 7 of the first 10 picks were going to be some order of the 3 quarterbacks at the top, plus Malik Neighbors, plus Marvin Harrison Jr., plus Joe Alt, plus J.C. Latham, and I thought Rome Odunze was a borderline top 10 lock as well. He ended up going 9th. This year, as we talked about, Mel, not nearly as much certainty at the top. So this may not be the perfect example of a player to break down, or to start with, I should say, but let's begin with a quarterback that we were talking about at one time. I was at least thinking this guy could go in the first 10 picks of the draft. Let's start with Alabama's Jalen Milroe, Mel, because on a good day, last season, he looked like the kind of guy that could go in the first round. On the bad days, wasn't so good. What's a general range, if you had to guess, for Jalen Milroe? And then what maybe was the maximum range for this guy? Like, how wide is the variance?
I'm just going to say field second round. I think his talent, his skill set, and I kept looking at Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, 6'2 and a quarter, 216, coming out of Louisville. Jalen Milroe, 6'2", 217, almost identical, right? Jalen Milroe, 4.37 at the pro day. Lamar Jackson didn't run, he'd be in a 4.3s. 9.5 hands for Lamar Jackson, 9 3/8 hands for Milroe. Very similar. Completion percentage, career for Lamar was 57%. For Jalen Milroe, 64%.
Yeah.
Okay? He had a higher completion percentage career than Lamar did. Now, Lamar had more rushing yards and all that. And the Georgia game this year, you referenced it, Field. If you watched him against Georgia, and it wasn't the only game.
No.
He was 67% or better in 8 games this year, okay? But then he had the clinkers. He had the Oklahoma game, right? 11 for 26, okay? They contained him, 3 interceptions in that game. Tennessee game, okay? He had some games where you say, boy, the Michigan game, the bowl. There were games where you're sitting there, why wasn't he performing not just at a great level, elite level, but at least at a satisfactory level where you said, okay, he did a couple things great, couple bad, but overall the team kind of didn't get it done. But no, this was on Jalen Milroe, that he didn't bring his A game, B game, even C+ game. So again, that's where you say, it's just a little hiccups. It's the fact that the inaccuracy, not just the short, intermediate, deep throws, all levels, there was some inaccuracy there and some, I would say, more erratic play. Because like I said, his accuracy career was better than Lamar's was.
Yeah.
But the erratic performances and not building on what we saw, the Georgia game was his. If you can bottle that Field, if you could bottle that Georgia game, like I said, he wasn't awful. He was pretty good in a lot of games, but that Georgia game, he was elite. He'd be a top 10 pick.
Right.
Okay? He runs into 4.3s. We know his size and his physicality. We know he wants to be great. He's a great kid. We know he's going to keep working hard and being great. I think when you watch him, seeing the field instinctive things that the great quarterbacks have. They just know. It's almost like they have eyes in the back of their head, Field. It's not just feeling pressure in the pocket, but it's seeing the field. And it was all in basketball, same with a point guard. A point guard's got to see things, right?
Yeah.
And as a quarterback, you have to be that distributor of the football. And that leads to throwing with anticipation, for getting the ball to the receiver who can do the maximum with the football after the catch. Jalen Milroe at times struggles seeing the field. Yeah. And I think that's something, I know, coaching it, teaching it, that's where you say, how good can he be? But Lamar Jackson, New Orleans traded up in the first round. I'm sitting there at the draft table. It's got to be Lamar.
Right.
And I'm saying, Lamar, if they're trading up from late first to mid first, that's to get Lamar Jackson. The card's in. It's Marcus Davenport. Are you? Boy, I look pretty bad. At that, I'm thinking, okay, Lamar, we get to the last pick in the draft. We were almost signing off. You know, we were done. It was then Ozzie Newsome was retiring, right, as a GM. Makes the trade to get into the late first round, take Lamar Jackson. My point here is Lamar Jackson wasn't loved by the league. If they loved Lamar Jackson, they'd have taken Lamar Jackson before Ozzie Newsome traded into the late first round, okay, and took him, okay? Because guess what? Before they drafted Lamar Jackson, they drafted another player, right? Remember?
Hayden Hurst.
Hayden Hurst, tight end. Hayden Hurst.
Like a 26-year-old tight end, right?
Jackson. What's that?
It was like a 26-year-old when he was drafted, too, by the way. Hayden Hurst, because he had played baseball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is the point. This is why it's so difficult to draft quarterbacks. And the Ravens didn't know what they had with Lamar Jackson.
Right.
If they thought Lamar Jackson was going to be Lamar Jackson that we see great in the NFL,
they would have traded up for him in like the first 10 picks. Yeah, exactly. No doubt.
And the thing is, you don't know if you were going to. What if somebody else would have given a better deal? They would have gotten into the late first and gotten Lamar Jackson, right?
Yeah.
What if New Orleans
100%.
would have made that move and gotten Lamar Jackson? They would have had him. But even then, when you're picking and you're sitting there and you're saying, New Orleans is moving up. Oh, my gosh, you're going to get Lamar Jackson.
Right.
You dodge that one, right?
Totally.
And then he's sitting there for you, and you take Hayden Hurst,
right?
And then you have to trade back in to get Lamar Jackson. My point here is nobody knows quarterbacks. This league, I say clueless. Everybody's clueless on quarterbacks field. You don't know. Just be celebrating and have the fireworks display going off when you finally get your guy. Yeah. And when you get your guy, if I'm an owner, you better daggone side win. I'll give you a year. I'll give you a mulligan like they're giving the Bengals, but I'm not giving you 2 years. You got a great quarterback, an established great quarterback. You better be in that mix to get to the Super Bowl every year. And if there's a ton of injuries, I'll give you that mulligan, whatever. Things happen, go awry, fine. Bottom line is, once you get that guy, you got to win because it's not easy to find that great quarterback, believe me. That's why in Washington right now, they couldn't be happier. They could not be happier because they know from now on for the next, what do you think, 15 years, Fielding?
Feels about that
15?
way, yes.
They're going to be rolling, man. They're going to be rolling, maybe to a Super Bowl, okay? Yeah. So that's where, again, for Jalen Milroe, we don't know what he's going to be. He's the mystery man at the quarterback position this year.
He sure is, Mel. I think he ends up somewhere in the second or third round. Power Duck _12 notes, by the way, the Browns have Tommy Rees as their new offensive coordinator. Rees previously coached Jalen Milroe at Alabama when he had his best season there. We'll see whether Cleveland has interest in Jalen Milroe. I'll say at the same position, same conference, and I know that you're more confident on this player here, Mel. But again, the idea here is guys who have wide ranges, in a lot of cases, within the first round. And that's Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss, who you had most recently going 9th overall to the New Orleans Saints, who have Derek Carr for one more season under contract. But this is a team that's kind of in a bit of purgatory in my estimation. They just hired a new head coach in Kellen Moore, who, by the way, 36 years old, the youngest head coach in the entire NFL. At some point, you'd like to think they'd give him a young quarterback that fits his preferences. But when you talk to people that don't need a quarterback in this year's draft class, there's some apprehension on Jaxson Dart. Some apprehension on him even being worthy of a first-round pick at all. Some would say, hey, maybe I could see it happening in the Lamar Jackson circumstance where you trade in from, let's call it the early second round to the late first round to A, beat other teams that might have the same idea, and B, Mel, to secure that fifth-year option, which can be very valuable for a quarterback if you hit, because it's a massive bargain relative to what you're signing when these guys get to that veteran contract money. Let me give you what I think are the pros of Jaxson Dart, and then let me give you some of my reservations on Jaxson Dart. Highly experienced quarterback, right? He's played 4 years of college. He played 1 year at USC as a true freshman, then finished up at Ole Miss. And during that time, by the way, he broke the Ole Miss school record for passing yards, surpassing Eli Manning. So a legitimate record to break for Jaxson Dart during his 3 seasons. He also led the FBS in yards per attempts last year. He can drive the football down the field with accuracy. He's a mobile quarterback too, Mel. He has not yet run. I'm not sure if he will run a 40 during the pre-draft process. He is a good athlete. Today's NFL is so full of incredible athletes at the quarterback position that he's not an elite athlete for that spot, but he's certainly a good enough athlete that you can draw up some stuff to design with his legs. On top of that, there is good accuracy here for Jaxson Dart. There's a lot of good with Jaxson Dart. I think the question mark is two things. Is there a lot of exceptional, and do you see that exceptional consistently enough? That, I think, is the question that evaluators, including myself, have about Jaxson Dart. Does he have, I said he got good downfield accuracy. Does he have the howitzer of an arm that sometimes when things aren't going so well, Mel, you got to be able to just trust your arm and zip it into space because you don't have a lot of room to set your own base up as a quarterback and unload with full force? Is he consistently using that athleticism in the game that you want to see? Not always. And how much torque does it require for him to and I'm not talking drive the football 50 yards down the field, but even drive the football to the outside portion of the field? I think he is a really solid prospect, Mel. He could go as high as 9. I don't think you're totally nuts in suggesting that. But if you told me that he is sitting there at 29 and the Browns trade up from the top of the second to the end of the first, I wouldn't be surprised either.
Yeah, a couple things there to unpack, from what you said, because I was listening to your comments. The last thing was not totally nuts, which means I'm somewhat nuts. Not totally nuts means you're somewhat nuts, okay?
Yeah, of course.
But so for 9. But I think when you look about the arm strength, and is it going to be arm strength? It's been proven over the years. And back in the day, when I had the hair like you do, Field, people said your arm's your arm. Whatever your arm is, you're not going to improve it. You are who you are, right? And then it's been proven with Tom Brady, with Peyton Manning, with Drew Brees, even Eli. Arms get better. They get stronger. Mechanically get sounder, okay? These guys are working with these quarterback throwing experts. Remember the pitching days back in the day when you had guys working with these experts and knew everything about muscles and this and that and how you're supposed to do it mechanically to get the maximum out of that arm. That's what you're seeing now. So to me, Jaxson Dart, his arm will get a little stronger in the NFL. Nobody's going to work harder at his craft than Jaxson Dart will. The skill set's there to build on once he's in the NFL. I do think this. I think the range for him is 9 to 26. Mike Tannenbaum had him going to the Rams at 26 in his mock yesterday. Bottom line is, or whatever, a couple days ago. Then you have Field and Yates thinking Pittsburgh. And I just want to correct you on one thing, Field. You're throwing out some bad information on me. You threw me under the bus a couple times.
What I do?
I don't appreciate it. And I'm going to answer to your critique of me, which was false. You've been saying, erroneously, that Kiper. You say others. You didn't say my name. You should say the people were yelling when I had
others.
Pittsburgh taking 21. Remember that?
Matt Miller and Jordan Reed.
And I was screaming at you too, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't screaming at you for Dart to Pittsburgh because of anything except this. At the time, this is all about real time. When you said that, it was real time.
Yep.
I thought Justin Fields was going to be back with the Pittsburgh
I'll give you
Steelers.
a pass, then.
No, I'm not expecting any passes. I'm just telling you why I said what I did, okay? No passes and needed here. But I said, okay, Justin Fields, I could not ever wrap my arms around Justin Fields not being a Steeler.
Yeah.
I thought Tomlin stole him for a 6th-round pick. He liked them coming out. He went 4-2, should have been 6. I'm thinking Fields is going to be there. Why in the heck is Fielding, right? You don't like Fields because it's too close to Fielding?
That's exactly right. He's stealing my mojo.
Yeah, exactly. So Fielding didn't love Fields enough to think he was going to be there, so you gave him time. I thought Fields would be there. Now he's the Jets, and he's going to be their starting quarterback. But my point is, in real time, that's why I said, why are you giving him Dart? They got a 25, 26-year-old Justin Fields who should have been 6-0 in the games he started, right? But now they didn't. Once they let Fields go to the Jets, then I'm back thinking, hey, Dart could go to the Steelers. So it's all about real-time fielding. So I think throw away that everybody was screaming at you. I was screaming at you at the time. I'm not screaming at you now. So range 9, what's Pittsburgh at? 21.
21, yep, 21.
21 and 26, the Rams, right?
So that's a pretty wide range, though. 17 picks is a big range in the first round, at least, right? And again, that's sort of emblematic of this year. Think about guys like last year, right? Like wide range players in the first round were hard to find at the very beginning. It was like, will Rome Odunze go 6th or will he go 9th? Will Brock Bowers go 5th or could he go maybe 12th. He ended up going 13th, obviously, to the Raiders. But still, 8 spots is not a huge range relative to this year's
the guys last year field, really, Penix Jr. and Nix were 2 quarterbacks at this time last year. I was talked out of Nix at 12 to Denver by my friends. Talked out of it.
They're nuts.
They were screaming at me like you scream at me. Yeah, my friends taught me. They're not friends anymore. Okay, about that. and then Michael Penix Jr. goes in the top 10 as well to Atlanta, who had Kirk Cousins.
Right.
So what we love about the draft field. This is where this draft was built on mystery.
Yeah, it was.
It's built on people thinking they know, but you really don't know until the pick is made. The worst question anybody has ever asked me on radio shows, Field, is, Mel, tell me who the shocking first-round pick is going to be.
Come on.
If it was a shock, it's going to be a shock.
Would it be a shock to you? That's right.
It would be a shock if I can tell you what the shocking first-round pick is going to be. Yep. So that's why we love the draft. We loved it forever. I loved it before anybody else did. Luckily, that's the only thing I've been right on. Kim Kiper, I was right on. Marriage, overachieved in marriage, and I got right about the fact that the business to be in is the NFL draft business. When everybody said I was crazy, I'll just pat myself on the back for 2 things that I hit on.
Yep.
And I got 100% right. The NFL draft being so popular and Kim Kiper being incredible.
Okay,
those were 2 things.
You said you got to correct me earlier. Let me correct you. You said you overachieved on Kim Kiper. Way overachieved. Overachieved. All right, so let me just make sure that we have the right emphasis there. Yeah, you can't argue with that. All right, let's go from quarterbacks to wide receivers here, Mel. And 2 players that, by the way, I agree with your pick. You'll probably agree with my pick as well, but for different reasons. Let's start with Luther Burden III from Missouri. Mel came into this year with top 10 aspirations, and not so sure about that one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if we went back, and I was talking to Chris Canty and Michelle today and Evan today about on the ESPN radio about, the guys that we had back, remember on day 3, we always go top 10 for next year?
Yep.
Kelvin Banks Jr., right? Mykel Williams, Malachi Starks, James Pierce Jr., Luther Burden III were all guys we thought would be the early portion of round 1 fielding. Yeah. So Luther Burden III, he was number 1 coming out of high school. He goes to Missouri. He's going to be great. And he was great. 86 catches, 9 touchdowns in 2023. Dropped down to 61 catches this year. Dropped from 14 yards a catch down to 11. Touchdowns from 9 to 6. To me, the fact he still came through, though, late. They were the comeback cardiac kids. They were coming back in games, okay? They were making dramatic second-half comebacks, and they were winning games late. Almost beat South Carolina late on a comeback, right? Then South Carolina went down the field at the end to beat them, right?
Yeah.
This Missouri team was built on that late in the game. Brady Cook hurt, comes back. That was the South Carolina game. Late in games, Luther Burden III still came up big in some of those games. Yep. He was quiet. Theo Weiss Jr. was being the guy. Then all of a sudden, there's Luther Burden III showcasing what kind of talent he has. Nobody feels, and I tell you what, he is the most overlooked player that has this kind of skill set and talent and has shined big in at the collegiate ranks than Luther Burden III. And I say that for this reason. You talk about wide receivers. Emeka Egbuka's red hot. Matthew Golden's red hot. You watch Luther Burden III field, this kid's got a lot of talent. Ball in his hands, trying to tackle him, what he can do there. You see skill. You see talent. And again, we're pushing him into the second round. That's where everybody now sees him, right?
I agree, yes.
I thought maybe Dallas at one point, and now we're saying second round. So again, and nobody's even mentioning his name in the late first. Now we're talking about Egbuka. And by the way, we're talking about Golden, and we're talking about Savion Williams at TCU, Jack Besh at TCU, the 2 Iowa State kids, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, right?
Yeah,
then you're talking about Isaiah Bond fell back, the forgotten man. Right now, I don't know if you agree with me or disagree. The forgotten man I see nobody talking about is Luther Burden III.
I would agree, Mel. And this is a hard thing that we do in this role, which is talking about how, scouts see the physical traits of a player, right? They're also trying to figure out, how is this guy wired? How driven is he? How consistent is he day in and day out? And I think that after this past year, we did not get the best version of Luther Burden III. I talked about this when the pre-draft process, or at least let's call it the end of the NFL's regular season. He had a very critical 3 months ahead to answer a lot of questions from scouts. Now, he ran that 4.41 at the combine. That was one of the questions he had to answer. When he has the football in his hands, Mel, he is electric. That much is for sure. What are you getting day in and day out from Luther Burden III? If you can extract that best version, Mel, he'll be a steal somewhere in the 30s, I think, second round. But if not, then you might get what you saw this past year, which is a pedestrian version of Luther Burden III, and the reason why we're even having this conversation. All right, so totally different, I would say, concerns here would be Tetairoa McMillan, Arizona wide receiver, who I love, and we've had a lot of nice things to say about him throughout the process. There was times in which we thought he could have been a top 10 overall pick. I don't think that's totally impossible, Mel, but we can use history as a bit of a data point here and kind of an indicator. Tetairoa McMillan only ran the 40 at his pro day. He did not run it at the combine. So 40 times are subject to the person that had the stopwatch in their hand. I talked to people that had him mostly in the 4.53 to the 4.57 range at his pro day. Let's call it 4.55 to make it right in the middle there, Mel. How many 4.55 wide receivers go in the first 10 picks of the draft? I'll give you a hint. Not many of them. I think you actually nailed the range for T-Mac a while ago. You said, hey, maybe there's a chance in which he goes all the way as high as, did you say 5 to the Jaguars? Is that correct, or am I putting words in your mouth?
I don't remember 5. I'll have to check field real quick. I think in back. I'll go back real quick. Keep talking.
Yeah, somewhere inside the top 10, and the low end would be 22, which would be the Los Angeles.
McMillan in mock 1.0 was 6 to the Raiders.
Okay, so there you go.
Okay.
6. Yep.
Then mock 2.0, he was at 22 to the Chargers.
Yep. All right. So there we go.
In mock 3.0, he is at 20 to Denver.
There you go. So that's a rough range there, right? Maybe a 14 or 15 spot range. I said it's very hard to find 4 or 5-ish wide receivers going in the top 10. Not totally impossible. And Mel, some of the factors he has working in his favor is that this is not a great wide receiver class, right? Travis Hunter at the top all by himself. T-Mac, I think, has a very compelling case. He's still the second best wide receiver in my book. Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka, the next names that often come to mind in talking to people around the NFL. But I still give T-Mac the edge because of the size, because of the ability to be a factor in the red area with that huge catch radius, that 6'4", 219-pound frame. And I don't think on tape his speed is such a deficiency that he feels like he's lumbering out there. That's at least my take on Tetairoa McMillan, Mel. So maybe he ends up settling in somewhere in the 12 to 15 range. But again, this is a wider range than we thought for T-Mac early in the process.
Yeah, and also you mentioned about the Jaxson Dart. Could he go? That's the big question. Could he go ahead of Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah.
Could that happen? I think Matthew Golden is the one that running that 4.29 was astonishing.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And then on the heels of a great year at Texas, he had a couple concentration drops. That was it. And on the heels of 2 really good years at Houston, one of which was when he was really young there. He put up really good numbers with the Houston Cougars. Matthew Golden could go ahead of T-Mac. It's possible he could.
It's possible, yeah.
That's another team I thought about for T-Mac was Dallas. Dallas certainly could go wide receiver. They could go running back. They have other need areas as well. But they're another team that's in that mix. But the fact of the matter is, once we finish and we started looking at, the speed and how's he going to, the contested catches in college. If you have contested catches in college, what's going to happen in the NFL? Will there be enough separation there? So I think those are things that could push him down. Let's say Travis Hunter out of the equation because he's dual offense, defense of wide receivers that are just wide receivers. Matthew Gold, even Emeka Egbuka to that, as a possibility. But I would say, there's a chance that T-Mac's not the first true wide receiver taken in this draft.
All right, a question here comes from Football Analysis YT, who wants to know this, Mel. Jihaad Campbell is going to fall to a contender due to positional value and is going to be one of the best values in the draft, isn't he? Now, Football Analysis did not include another dynamic that is now in play, Mel, and I think you and I would agree is the more important one. Jihaad Campbell, for those that haven't been following the news, had labrum surgery like a few weeks ago, Mel, after the combine. Not that him and I are at all similar, but as somebody who went through labrum surgery back in September, I'm just going to tell you, it takes a while to get anywhere close to your normal self here, Mel. What's the range now for Jihaad Campbell?
I was texting my friends in the NFL, right? That's what you do when this type of thing happens.
I'm holding up something right now.
A great year. This kid had 117 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 7 or more tackles in 12 of 13 games, double-digit tackles in 5 games. 6'3", 235 pounds, ran 4.52, and he has the length. He's got all that feel. He would have been, and when I did the mock 3.0, I thought about him to Atlanta. Yep. Ended up at 19 to Tampa. Yep. Now, this is what I was getting, the feedback I got. You can tell me which feedback you got because I know you were doing the same thing.
Yep.
I had one text come in and said, he's still going to be ready, despite the surgery. He's going to be ready for the summer at some point.
Yep.
He'll be ready pre-start of the regular season to be here. Now, how ready? You're the expert. You had it. You had the surgery. So we'll get that. That's the optimistic view. He could be ready to start practicing and playing some prior to the start of the season. That's optimistic. I had somebody else say, it's a concern. It's a concern.
It is.
And he's going to be maybe a second-round pick now.
Yeah.
Second round for guys some people had in the top 10, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to think there's a chance he slips out of round one. There's a chance. I don't know what a percentage chance. I didn't talk to 32 teams. I only talked to a few. But when I heard second round, this is somebody I respect and gets it right a lot. Second round, yeah, we'll see. Because this kid, like I say, just a few weeks ago was being mocked by some, I've heard, in the top 10. I had him 19 to Tampa. Maybe, and I had somebody say, optimistic, they could still take him. Because guess what? If you want to wait a little bit, he's a hell of a player.
Yeah,
he's going to be outside rushing the passer. He was off ball making plays. He's super smart, great football IQ, and he was making plays in every which way this year playing that position for Alabama. So, yes, if you want to wait a little bit, you could end up with a heck of a player, but you're going to, and then a shoulder for a linebacker. So, again, that's where there is a range field. I'd say right now, I'd go Tampa Bay at 19, into the second round somewhere.
Yep, I was holding up my two fingers there before you could actually see me on the screen, Mel, just as like an indicator of the feedback that I was getting from a decent number of people is this is probably a late one to an early two player now. And there's just so much risk that is involved in taking a player who might not be ready for the beginning portion of the season. Now, you and I both believe the foundation of the draft is finding players that can be a part of your franchise for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? At the same time, when you're drafting a player who might fill one of your biggest needs, and then you're not certain whether that guy's going to be there at the beginning of this upcoming regular season, of course, that is concerning for a team, on top of the fact that can you really get your hands on the guy that much between now and when the draft actually takes place? He's still in a sling as of right now. Like, you're not going to have a full, complete picture of what that shoulder is looking like on April 24th. He's an incredible player here, Mel. And you're right. Maybe he goes to Philadelphia at number 32 overall and plays alongside Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean when he is eventually healthy. And that will be another Howie Roseman heist. Wouldn't surprise me. But I thought there was a chance that maybe a team in the first 15 picks is saying to itself, we got to fill that need, right? To your point, Tampa at number 19, Cincinnati at number 17. We got to fill those linebacker needs right now. I just don't know that you can feel as confident about him going that high just because of this shoulder concern. All right, the next player here, Mel, is one that we have talked about maybe as much as any non-quarterback in this year's class. It's Will Campbell from LSU. No need to belabor it, really, Mel. 32 and 5/8-inch arms for Will Campbell. What does that mean? That if he were to play left tackle next year, based off of the week one starters last year, he would have the second shortest arms in the entire NFL amongst those 32 starters. I believe he'd be tied with, or maybe an eighth of an inch bigger than Alaric Jackson or Bernard Raymond from Indianapolis. Here's the bottom line, Mel. You don't see a lot of guys who are 32 and 5/8-inch left tackles. That being said, I believe fundamentally in the athlete the player is. I believe fundamentally in the experience, the mentality here for Will Campbell. This is a guy who is 6'6" and 319 pounds. Not a tiny guy by any stretch, it's just these arms. I am going to sort of plant my flag and remain a Will Campbell guy, regardless of where he ends up in the draft. I'm also going to acknowledge that while if the Patriots don't get Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, he'd be my pick at number 4 overall, Mel. There's also a chance he slides to number 10, maybe number 11. I kind of think 11 might be the low end for Will Campbell, Mel, because the 49ers desperately need offensive line help. And if Armand Mbow or Will Campbell was there, I think they go with one snap of the fingers and say, welcome to San Francisco. That being said, once again, a player who has a ton of talent, a ton of experience, has incredible football character here, Mel, might be a slam dunk to some, not a slam dunk to others.
Yeah, I'm 13 to Miami. I think it might be as far. You're right, 11 to the 49ers field. Now Chicago's done their things. Yep. I think they're satisfied with where they are right now on the O-line. But I think with Will Campbell, and I talked to an offensive line coach in the NFL that's a specialty, and it wasn't a huge concern to say, I can't take him as a left tackle. It's about how do you utilize your arm length, okay? How do you get that first punch in, quick, violent hands we talked about, okay? It's all about control. If you can get into my body, and those defensive ends coming out of college and into the NFL as first-round picks, and those defensive ends that are in the NFL are the best in the world, right? They have long arms, the majority of them, okay? We always talk about pass rushers, arm length there, very important. So if they can get into your body and control and then utilize that to move and get out and the reach you need to get those wide nines, the bottom line is arm length is huge for most positions in the NFL. It really is. And to say he's an outlier is true. He is an outlier. He's going to have to be that to be a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle in the NFL. So that's why there is that range. It was talked about at New England. We knew his arm length wasn't going to be in the category to say it's a defined, okay, no problem type range.
Right.
We knew it would be somewhat of an issue. I said 33. Some said I should have said 33 and a half, 34. It came in, would it come in field 32 and change?
32 and 5/8. But if it had gotten to 33, Mel, maybe the conversation is a bit different.
Yeah, and again, that's important. I will say this: it's more important to some than it is to the other. They're not going to eliminate him as a left tackle possibility. They're not.
Totally. Yeah, a lot of people are.
They're not going to do that. It's not going to happen. But for those teams, and Bill Polian screamed to me for years about this field, you have to stay within a range. If you're out of that range, then you have to say it's not going to work. And I'm not drafting outliers. So if there's teams that do have that range you need as forms of arm length, then Will Campbell won't be on their radar. But for teams that think the way some do, it's about how you utilize your arm length. That's the important thing. And Will Campbell has done that pretty effectively in college, right?
Yep.
Will that continue in the NFL where the guys coming in or they're in the NFL rushing the passer all have the arm length to be a problem?
Yeah.
Okay, not college guys where you don't see it all the time, but in the NFL they do. So that reach, that arm length is important for obvious reasons. We talked about that. We don't need to talk about it anymore. But for Will Campbell, there is a range, I think, down to 13 to Miami.
Yep, I think this player is just an awesome, awesome guy, though. I think that I just feel like I'd be very comfortable taking him, knowing what I know about the human that Will Campbell is, whether he's a tackle, whether he's a guard. I do think he will prosper. Next question comes from D. Paddle Prescription, who wants to know, Mykel Williams is pretty high on the mock and your rankings. I see the measurables, but the production was lacking. How far ahead is he in comparison to Mike Green and James Pierce Jr. here, Mel? Pretty good sort of jumping off point to Mykel Williams and how he can be a bit of a divisive topic as well.
Yeah, Mykel Williams is a tough evaluation. He really is, because he does have the skill set that you want from just a physicality standpoint, the way he gets after you the run. I mean, this kid plays hard, and he had the ankle injury, which that is an excuse. There's a reason to say, I have an excuse, a valid excuse as to why I didn't perform at the level expected this year. That ankle injury occurred early in the campaign. But as Kirby Smart said, he didn't shut it down, field. And a lot of these prospects, these high-end prospects, do shut it down when they get an injury. He played, and he kept going out there trying to help this football team. From a character standpoint, I give him a ton of credit in that regard. But there's a range for Mykel Williams, because there's a couple guys. I'm going to throw a couple pass rushers out there that I think are probably better pure pass rushers right now.
Yep.
I know one I'll give you. I'll give one that I guarantee you is a better pure pass rusher than Mykel Williams.
Who is it?
Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College.
No doubt. Led the FBS pressures last year. Yeah.
Bend. He has closing speed.
Yeah.
He's got a repertoire of moves. Okay. Now, against the run, Mykel Williams is great, right?
Yeah.
Donovan Ezeraku, not so much. So that's where you're going to have to sacrifice what you want. But what are you looking for? Double-digit sacks? Ezeraku can get you there, I think. Mykel Williams, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can get to 10 sacks, field. So I think there is a range from 10 down to the late first, field.
Completely
I really do.
agree.
I think 10 down to maybe Detroit.
You want a comparison? And it's not going to stack up in the sense that like the physical tools look the exact same here, Mel. But how about George Karlaftis? And when I say that, what do I mean? It's not that George Karlaftis has the same length as Mykel Williams, right? If you saw those two next to each other, Williams probably might impress you more on the hoof. But George Karlaftis was this guy that ends up going in the first round. And the idea was, he's a double, right? Like, this guy's a rock-solid football player who maybe he never gets to 10 sacks, like you said, or 15 sacks. But George Karlaftis is going to play for a long, long time and be a starting pass rusher, a starting edge player for you for a while, right? And what's the old cliche? You can't go broke making a profit, right? Mykel Williams, maybe he never gets 13, 14 sacks in a season here, Mel. But I also think this guy's going to find a way to stay on the field for a long, long time. That length, he's just going to swat passes left and right. And there is more pass rush upside than I think we saw at the college level.
Yeah, and I think the Bengals feel. We think about the Bengals sitting there with pick 17.
Make a lot of sense.
And they're going to take a defensive player. We know that. Mykel Williams is probably going to be, he could be in the mix there. He certainly could be in that mix for the Cincinnati Bengals at that particular point, as he will be for a lot of teams, like I say, picking in the mid to late first round if he gets down that far.
Hey, Mel, I got to tell you, this is a little bit of news that I just got from someone who's down at the LSU Pro Day. Will Campbell's arms have grown 3/8 of an inch since the combine.
Are you 33?
33 inches at LSU Pro Day.
He's in the range.
Isn't it amazing how this happens? You're right back. We're back, baby. We are back. All right, Mel, last one here, and then we're going to get to some of our guys and our Orange Crushers.
Oh, he did the Brady Bunch. Remember, he did the Brady Bunch deal. Remember?
Yeah, that's
remember?
Right. Hey, Mr. Campbell spent every night stretching Will's arms like this. You see, the Campbell household is just grabbing him, oh, man, every which way. All right, Mel, so last question here comes from 49ers Access. Sell me on why the 49ers should draft Will Johnson over an offensive lineman or defensive lineman / edge at pick number 11. All right, I'm going to address more of Will Johnson than I am the 49ers at number 11 here, Mel. Will Johnson, unbelievable football player, Mel. You want to win tomorrow? I got confidence Will Johnson helps you win tomorrow. He's got one limitation in the eyes of scouts that I'm not totally certain, Mel, is a real limitation, but it's something that's going to influence his draft stock. It's how fast is he? How fast is Will Johnson's fast? Is your fast 4.45 or is your fast 4.55? Because the reality is, Mel, if it's 4.55 or even 4.52, you might not go in the first 10 picks here, Mel. Yep. He's an unbelievable football player, though. 6 interceptions in his Michigan career, returned 3 of them for a touchdown. He had 2 pick sixes just this year. He played just 6 games because of a foot injury. I doubt we'll ever see Will Johnson run a 40 prior to the draft. I'm not sure it does him a whole lot of good if he isn't all on that borderline of 4.50 or 4.52. But because of that fact, Mel, and I'll give you another corner who might drop a little bit now after he ran at his pro days, Azareye'h Thomas, from Florida State. I heard he was at like 4.58, 4.59 at the Florida State pro day, Mel. Those kind of guys are hard to draft in the first round if they're 4.58, 4.59. So Will Johnson may kind of protect himself by not running a 40 at any point during this pre-draft process. I love a lot about the football player. Some might think he's a better fit in his zone.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at a couple injured players. This is how you have to feel about the second round fielding. If you feel that, okay, I can get a Savone Revel Jr., who's coming off an ACL in September in the second round and waiting for him to get healthy and be back to 100%. He was off to a great start this year. He's got a ton of talent. He's got the length and the athleticism you want. Then you think about a corner like Benjamin Morrison at Notre Dame. Injured most of the year. How do you feel about him coming back? So if you can get in the second round a corner like that, you mentioned the 49ers, right? That's who we're talking about here. Will Campbell is sitting there. Armand Mbow is sitting there. You know, one of the two is sitting there. Would you wait until the second round and maybe think, hey, Revel Jr. would have been a first? Mike Tannenbaum still out in the first when we did his mock. I think the Green Bay.
Ben Moore. Okay? There's a bunch of these guys, Mel.
Azareye'h Thomas on the borderline. Now, who ran great? Barron from Texas ran great.
Yep.
On the heels of a heck of a year. And then also Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. Great 40 on the heels of a year where he was injured, but 2 years ago, he was an interception waiting to happen at Kentucky. So for me, will you wait till the second round? But know that Will Campbell, Armand Mbow, if one of those two are there, Field, what would you do? Hey, I'll ask you. The 49ers are sitting there with Mbow, Campbell, and Will Johnson on the board. What do you do?
I'm taking an offensive lineman. And I'm a Will Campbell guy, so I will defer to Will Campbell. And in that scenario, I think you we'll follow the Jonathan Ogden plan, right? He's not 6'9", but he'll play guard until Trent Williams is no longer playing, and then he'll kick out to left tackle because I am a Will Campbell believer, especially now that he has those 33-inch arms, Mel. Let's go, baby, 33-inch arms.
Wow.
Here's what I want. I want Will
Bobby
Campbell
Brady. Bobby Brady on the swing, holding up, just stretching it out, Field, whatever it takes.
I'm a Will guy. I'm a Will guy through and through. So I wasn't as bothered as some were by the 32 5/8 of an inch. But I would love to see Will do a private pro day like 3 weeks from now, and then have 33 and a half arms. You know,
you're at half.
Yeah, 33 and a half. Yeah, why not? Right. That's so good.
By April 24th, it'll be 34 arms.
That's right. That's right. 34 arms. That's amazing there. All right, Mel, we're going to wrap things up. We're going to continue with our Orange Crushers in just a little bit here, Mel, which is players that deserve more attention. However, it's time for us to begin with our guys, because we do have ourselves a guy that you're banging the gavel for here, Mel. We got a guy who is your guy for this week, as you see the phenomenal poster right there.
I always say they're entertaining offensive linemen to watch in college, okay? Marcus Mbow from Purdue was an entertaining right tackle to watch. He just dominated. He was just flying, guys flinging him around. He was throwing him around, okay? It was like a rag doll. I mean, this guy, and the athleticism he displayed at Purdue at right tackle. Now he played right guard in 2022. Going to be a guard in the National Football League. Forget about the Senior Bowl practices. He's a guard in the NFL, one-on-ones. Hey, I don't care about that. I care about what he's going to do in a situation, one an offensive line in the NFL. With his athletic skill set, he is one of the best athletes at the guard spot you'll come across. This kid loved to block in space. He loved the screen pass. He said, hey, that's my favorite. What was Brett Favre's favorite? The screen pass, right?
Yeah,
Mike
the
Holmgren,
best, right?
Screen pass. And to have that ability to get down that field 20 yards and be able to hit guys in space, that's Marcus Mbow. So when I did all my research on Mbow, and you see the kid he was on film, on tape, and the player he was at right tackle at Purdue, you put it all together, Phil, we talk about different guys projecting from tackle to guard. He played guard.
Yeah.
He played guard. So I think he's to me as a player, he's an early to mid second round type of guy.
Interesting, Mel. Yeah.
Early to mid two. Yeah. If he gets into the late two, early third, then he qualifies for me as a steal. Yep. Marcus Mbow from Purdue. If you want to have fun, entertainment isn't just the wide receivers and the running backs, okay, and the quarterbacks and the skill player. Offensive linemen can be entertaining. There was no more fun player to watch that got you excited about watching tape, watching offensive lineman than Marcus Mbow at Purdue this year.
He is really fun, Mel. That much is for sure. I have been told that he is intent on playing tackle at the NFL level. We'll see whether that holds up once he is actually drafted, but that was at least throughout a portion of this process what his desired goal was, to stay at tackle. We'll see whether he can. The body mass is just not significant, as you highlighted. He is a fun player to watch. I'm more in that late 2, early 3 personally. That being said, it's easy to see how he goes even higher than that. Stay in the Big Ten here, Mel. And a guy that I thought maybe gave Marcus Mbow, well, more specifically the Purdue offensive line in general, fits, is Ohio State's JT Tuimoloau. Mel, he could have come out last year, and I thought maybe would have been a top 2 rounds pick. He ends up going back to Ohio State, has 12 and a half sacks, 3 passes defensed. He forced a pair of fumbles as well, was a clutch football player for this Ohio State team that, of course, won the national championship. Is he a premier athlete? Not sold on that. Is this the kind of guy that has a bunch of flash to his game? Not sold on that either. But is this guy a professional football player who isn't even in the NFL yet? My answer is yes. This guy's got an incredible arsenal of pass rush moves here, Mel. He sets an edge as a run defender. He is rugged. He will run through you. He will do his job to make life for somebody behind him or around him easier. I thought he absolutely baptized some of these younger offensive tackles that he saw during his final season. Ohio State gave the Texas offensive tackles all sorts of fits when they played in the college football playoff. I think JT Tuimoloau, again, we were talking about how Mykel Williams may never reach 13, 14 sacks. I don't know if JTT ever gets you to double-digit sacks here, Mel. I think the guy is ready to go, though. He's going to be a player that I think is going to start early in his NFL career. This is not a perfect comparison, but Chris Braswell was drafted late in the second last year from Tampa Bay. Reminds me a little bit of each other in this regard, Mel. Again, I didn't think that Braswell was going to be this high upside double-digit sack player. He didn't play a ton for Tampa, but he went in the late 2. JTT could go somewhere in the 40 to 55, 60 range. I think this guy is just rock solid. I think you're going to know exactly what you're going to get from him every single day, and you're going to be able to count on JTT day in and day out.
Yeah, he loved Penn State. Remember that Penn State game was the attention getter a couple years ago. Yeah, and JT Tuimoloau is a guy I had heard from people. My friends in the league had mentioned maybe late first at one point. So this guy's range is, I think he's not getting out of the second round. So I would say second round for Tuimoloau from Ohio State. I think this is a kid, like I said, if you looked at the right games throughout his career, you would even have thought, like I said, and that was the talk. It wasn't just out there. It was just nonsense. It was late first as a possibility. And again, we talk second round, maybe early third, but this is a kid will play in the National Football League, and I think will be a solid player. He may not be elite. You may not be, like I say, that guy's going to get a ton of sacks, but I think he has a chance because, like I say, Karlaftis is a good example of a guy that people were talking about in the top 5, top 10 at one point,
right,
Field.
Yeah.
And he dropped into near the end of the first round. Like I said, for Tuimoloau, I'm with you. I think he doesn't get out of round 2.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys in round 2. Him, Nick Skeleton, that I think especially are impressive as second-round edge rushers that you know what you were going to get. All right,
how about Oladejo at UCLA? People forgot about my boy.
No. You're not crazy. They're crazy for calling you crazy about Femi. They're crazy.
Oh, you're on Femi's bandwagon now?
Femi is flirting with top 50 status on the Yates big board here. He's just too intriguing. He's too intriguing. He's too intriguing, right?
I'm with you. Oladejo, I've talked about him on this first draft podcast before. I think he was a my guy or an orange crusher. Yep. Oladejo, and I had him in a late first round in mock 2.0, if you remember.
Yeah.
The people were screaming at me about that. Well, he's a second, he's an early third. Well, Oladejo is a guy I think is gaining some steam. He's gaining some momentum finally, and people are liking what they see from this kid. It would not shock me if he was a late one, early to mid two. So I'm still big on Femi Oladejo from UCLA.
I think round 2 is in play there for Mr. Femi. All right, last one here, Mel. We're going to round out the show with your favorite segments, our Orange Crushers. It's guys who deserve more attention. Feed me. Who you got?
Bring it on.
Well, I should say serve me. Serve me up an Orange Crusher. Who do you got?
Doesn't that look good? I'm thirsty right now. I go for a few Orange Crushes. Orange Crusher for me is Shaun Dolan from Buffalo. This is a kid running back in high school at a school record. Talking about 157 total tackles his senior year at almost 2,000 rushing yards. Walk-on. I love those guys who are walk-ons in college and develop into great players. Led the MAC with 147 tackles in 2022. This past year led the nation in tackles. MAC Defensive Player of the Year. He's 6'2", 230, ran 4.54 with 25 reps. He had 16 tackles against Missouri this year. He had 19 tackles against Northern Illinois with an interception in that game. He had this past year, he intercepted 5 passes. You're talking about a guy who was really impactful field. All over the place on the field, Shaun Dolan from Buffalo. And I went back and I looked at, okay, who's he remind me of? And I got the numbers here if I can find. Zach Thomas.
Wow, let's go.
Came out of Texas Tech, had 400 career tackles fielding. Okay, I got to check my notes here because I couldn't remember how many tackles. Zach had 1996, came out as 5'11", 234. Dolan, 6', 230, very similar. Zach Thomas ran 4'8". Dolan ran 4'5'4". 400 career tackles for Zach. You know how many career tackles Dolan had, Field?
How many?
391.
Wow.
Okay. Jeez. So, I mean, you talk about similarities there in terms of the production, 391 career tackles to 400. Zach Thomas led the Southwest Conference in 1995 with 6 forced fumbles. We talk about instincts, toughness. This kid had 5. Dolan had 5 interceptions this past year at Buffalo.
Monster year.
Monster. Yeah, I think Shaun Dolan, not invited to the combine, Fielding.
That one makes sense to me.
Buffalo, off-ball linebacker, I think has a chance to become a 6th, 7th round draft choice.
Yep, agree on that one right there. A guy that I think will also go in the 6th or 7th round range, maybe a little bit higher, Mel, because I've reminded myself as I'm working through my overall big board that sometimes on day 3, crazy stuff happens, right? If you like a player, you don't let him get out of your grasp. Our guy, Giovanni Manu, went in the 4th round last year to the Detroit Lions. Yep. Still have hope for him. But how about Isaac TeSlaa, who... Mel, you remember Jared Valdir back in the day? I'm sure you do, the offensive lineman who played his college ball at Hillsdale College. Isaac TeSlaa played there for 3 seasons and then finished up at Arkansas, who this past year had 28 catches, it was something like 20.1 yards per catch for TeSlaa. He's 6'3", ran 4.42 at the combine. I mean, all the traits are right there. He was at the Senior Bowl as well. He's a little raw, Mel. He's still figuring out how to put it all together. But if I know one thing about day 3, is that it's often reserved for the guys who, when you're looking at the height, weight, speed boxes, check, check, check. Now, Arkansas was kind of a mess this past year, so perhaps the production that was relatively modest for a guy who might go somewhere on day 3, Mel, is a question mark to the eyes of some scouts. But I think that was more about the Arkansas system and the fact that they were just so up and down, or more down than up, I should say, this past season. But Isaac TeSlaa, the kind of guy that's kind of tailor-made for a day 3 pick. You can get him, draft him late, develop him. Maybe he's a guy that begins his NFL career in your practice squad, but I'm intrigued by Isaac TeSlaa.
Yeah, when Rob Adamski on day 3, our great producer, is talking about players and who would the highlight packages start running, this is your guy. So we always have who's our guys because these guys, as we're going to be talking about when they're picked on day 3.
Yep.
And this is one of Fielding's guys. And like I said, I look at Dolan in the same way. I think when you get to day 3, we love day 3 for these reasons. These are guys who are going to play. Some of these kids will play better than the 2nd and 3rd rounders, and even in some cases the 1st rounder. So again, this kid who I think showed he could go from one level to the SEC. Senior Bowl week did not look out of place, did not look like he was overmatched at all, tested really well. So when you get into that day 3 area, which is rounds 4 through 7, these guys, I think, will be guys coming off the board that we know will play in the National Football League field.
Yep, yeah, I'm with you, Mel. These are some fun football players, and as we know, day 3 is often a gold mine if you search hard enough for NFL talent. That was a fun show here, Mel. As always, thank you to everybody for watching and listening to the show. We are back on Monday with more action. He is Mel. I am Mel Kiper Jr. Greeny is back next week as well. We'll talk to you all just 4 weeks away from the 2025 NFL Draft.